Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with the midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. We're going to start with this news from Market Watch, as the cannabis industry's spending on Washington lobby has hit a record. So that does sound positive, but let's just see how much progress we've made over time, because while that sounds nice, it's still not a lot of spending being done compared to other industries. And so cannabis industry set a record in its annual spending in Washington lobbying last year, 2022, with its outlay of just $5.43 million. And so this is according to an analysis of disclosures by Open Secrets, which is the next link, so we'll pop over that just to see the breakdown of who's contributing the most. And in 2022, lobbying spending came in just slightly above the prior year of 2021, where they spent $5.22 million. So again, a little bit, a couple $100,000 more year over year, highlighting the obvious but unfortunate truth that the more money that goes to lobbying, the more likely you're going to get any sort of incremental reform in whatever industry you're fighting for. And obviously cannabis is one of the most stigmatized overall, but if we zoom out, we can see that this is progress from where we started. 2013, $30,000, 2014, $80,000, 2015, $300,000, 2016, $430,000. They just surpassed $1 million in 2017. And so interestingly enough, though, I got this from the Dales report, and their second snippet here, unfortunately, Big Pharma spent about $283.9 million, according to Statista. So obviously, U.S. MSOs get outmaneuvered 52 to 1. In that domain. Want legislation to pass, spend more money. That is the sad reality. And just for the breakdown, though, Open Secrets, highlighting the cannabis industry and its lobbying profile. 22 clients spent, again, $5.4 million last year, 112 or 51.79% number of lobbyist percentage of former government employees, which is pretty messed up, as this is the same revolving door policy that has allowed the FDA to be captured pretty much by Big Pharma, because you work for the government, then you lobby for Big Pharma, and then essentially you're doing everything in your path to pass legislation for Big Pharma after they're lobbying $280 million. So that's just one example of how this sort of system can get contaminated and not work in the best interest of the American people. But anyways, I digress. Annual lobbying, we've seen this growth over time, but just happy to highlight some of the companies. Canopy Growth Corp, number 1. Cresco Labs, number 2. I'm very happy as a shareholder of Cresco Labs that they happen to be number 2, and they're putting their money where their mouth is and trying to lobby to get some incremental reform. Number 3, Coalition for Cannabis Policy, Education, and Regulation. Number 4, National Cannabis Roundtable, Ghost Management Group. Number 5, U.S. Cannabis Council, Kronos Group, Pharmaceutical RX. I'm not going to go through all of them necessarily, just have to read them off, but, so you can obviously pause to read through. Good to see Trulieve on there, Columbia Care as well, as they plan to merge with Cresco. At the same time, I'm surprised not to see Curaleaf, Verano, or Green Thumb on here at all, and we can understand why. The longer safe banking takes, or any sort of incremental reform, the worse it is for small businesses and those harmed by the war on drugs that were promised an opportunity in this industry. It's worse for them because they don't get access to banking, they can't even compete, and it's the big MSOs in the long run that are obviously just going to benefit from the constant delays. So that's why it's unfortunate to see that, but nonetheless, interesting data. Grab the link below if you wanted to go through that. So on to some news that we're getting. Leafly reporting, can the Republican House pass cannabis reform? Don Murphy thinks so, and he's fighting to make it happen. And so thank you, Don Murphy, for fighting the good fight and sharing your efforts with us. And while he's optimistic, and we do love to see that, we have been played for the last 2 years, unfortunately, by the Dems, who claim that they wanted to reform cannabis laws and sadly haven't done anything. And while we're hopeful that they will, again, we got to take these with a grain of salt, and the best thing we can do is sort of just wait on the sidelines, especially at this point in time, for some sort of clear signal that we're actually going to get some reform. But what's funny is that while the Dems had the White House, the Senate, and the House, they did fuck all. Absolutely nothing. But why are we more hopeful that the Republican House can actually pass cannabis reform? Does that mean much if the Senate isn't going to take it up? With all that said, this is what Don Murphy sees as a winning strategy according to Leafly. And so the whole article will be below if you want to go through it. Not going to read through the whole thing, but just going to stop on certain snippets, highlighting safe banking. It is a law and order bill. It no doubt would make America safer by getting 26 plus billion of cash off of the streets and into the legal banking system. No doubt that's going to stop a lot of crime. GOP cannabis reformers are also primary winners, so hopefully their popularity can help drive some of this issue, especially Nancy Mace with the States Reform Act. If they can get that done, that's the best possible bill for cannabis. And over the years, I'm only 30, so I haven't been watching this for too long, but you hear that the Dems are the idealists, and they put on a good show about what they want to try and get done and what would, what would be beneficial for people, but then you see the Republicans come in and actually get shit done. Now, again, I'm young. I haven't fully tested that theory, but that's something I've heard over the years, as Republicans are now expected to deliver after 2 years of absolutely nothing. And so you can pause to read again for a little bit more. bills could make it out of the committee. Pause to read if you're interested. Veterans are key to moving progress forward, no doubt. I mean, obviously 50 years ago would have helped veterans if they did some sort of reform. But lastly, just to highlight, safe banking must start in the Senate, not the House. So Murphy says, in 2023, safe banking cannot start in the House. If you are a House Republican, you're like, I'm not sending this bill over to the Senate for the 8th time only to have it die. Let them send it over. They're still controlled by Democrats, right? You'd think that'd be in their best interest, and the House is a heavier lift now. I want Senator Daines to find himself 2 new Republican co-sponsors to prove to the world that they have the votes. That could be Mike Lee from Utah. That could be Tommy Tuberville from Alabama, who was on record saying he supported it if we had the votes. There's no doubt in my mind if we had the votes. If Daines drops the bill with 10 Republican co-sponsors on Democrat Sherrod Brown's desk and basically dares him not to hold a hearing, well, then the Dems are exposed. And so after all this time, all it highlights is that the Dems have essentially been as bad as the Republicans in the past against cannabis. And all we can really do is keep punching, follow the state-led growth story while we sort of, keep an eye on what's happening at the federal level and, just keep chugging along. And so that's basically what I wanted to get out of this. And then lastly, from Don Murphy, another video of him yesterday, as of, January 31st, 4:36 p.m. I can't remember when I've had a better day talking cannabis policy on the Hill. And so again, thank you for the active updates, Don. Without you, it'd be a lot darker, no doubt, not having a source on the ground in D.C. And it'll be even better tomorrow when House Judiciary and Financial Services, Safe Banking meet for the first time. See you then. And much respects for Brady Cobb in the past for doing all the work, but clearly Don Murphy's on the ground putting in a lot more lobbying work as opposed to growing more cannabis companies. And again, kudos to you, Brady, for all that you've done in the past, but Don Murphy's carrying the torch forward.
Hi, this is Don Murphy in Union Station. I'm about to catch a train after an amazing day on Capitol Hill. The House Oversight Committee had their first organizational meeting. I got a chance to be in the room for the first time in close to 3 years with all those members of Congress, many of them who we're going to need help with in the coming term. Chatted with the new chairman, the chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, where the Greg Stubbe Veterans Access Bill will go, and the subcommittee chair in Judiciary, where Alex Mooney's Second Amendment Protection Act will go. I'm feeling very optimistic, and I can't wait to get back.
I'd like to say I am too.
Thanks. See you then.
Thank you, Don. And also just wanted to reference this because I just noticed. If we had 10 Don Murphys, cannabis would be legal by now. Well, where's the other 9 of them? I'm still looking. So, Marijuana Moment, thank you for sharing this one. Again, take these with a grain of salt. I hate to share anything more unsafe, but I'm just sharing the news as it comes. Don't shoot the messenger. White House defers to Congress on cannabis banking reform. And so this was interesting because it's the first time we've heard the White House press secretary mention cannabis or anything related. The White House says that Congress is leading the charge for cannabis banking reform, and the Biden administration does not currently have any plans to announce executive action on this issue. That's unfortunate because obviously it would solve a lot of problems, make America a lot safer overnight, getting cash off the street and reducing crime. It's not a Dem thing, though, to try and reduce crime, I guess. At a press briefing last week, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was asked whether President Joe Biden intends to administratively resolve the banking issue for state legal cannabis businesses, many of which operate on largely cash-only basis and have been targets for crime under federal prohibition. I don't have any new policy announcements to make from here, of course, to be expected, but as you know, this is something Congress is working on. Oh, really? Is it? The press secretary said in response to the question from New Jersey's Jonathan Salant. We understand that there's an interest in legislation and action, but I would refer you to Congress because, again, this is, what they're working on. So kicking the can back to Congress, little to report on, but at least that's the White House acknowledging that cannabis banking reform is a bill and that, it should be taken up for obvious reasons. And so that's at least interesting to highlight. While I did want to touch on this article from Cannabis Business News, which is kind of infuriating because it's just, again, Booker being the walking, talking contradiction that he is. Booker saying he'll keep trying to pass weed legislation even with House Republicans in charge, as if the House Republicans are the ones in the way. But are you seriously that stupid and oblivious, Booker, to the fact that you had the White House, the Senate, and the House for the last 2 years and you did absolutely nothing? So no one ought to believe, or I don't think anyone does believe this crybaby anymore. And so again, big thank you to Don Murphy for actually adding a bit of constructive info that contradicts, again, what Booker's saying up there. Insider insight. Of the returning 23 House GOPs on the 118th Financial Services Committee, 15 voted yeah on the Safe Banking Act, 18 voted nay. 5 were co-sponsors, including Majority Whip Tom Emmer. This bodes well for the future of SAFE if the Senate Dems will vote on it, completely contradicting Booker saying, I'll keep trying to pass weed if the House Republicans don't get in the way. So it's just fucking infuriating. I want to expose this loser as much as I possibly can. And just to highlight some of that article that they referenced, this is in reference to the press secretary saying, as you know, this is something Congress is working on, deferring people to them. But then this is Booker crying about it. For now, this is a cannabis crisis, Booker said, because I didn't do my job and pass SAFE, and now the people that I campaigned to and said that I would, reform so that they get an opportunity in this industry, they don't get it. And so that's why the passage of SAFE is so important, says Michael Correa, the top lobbyist for the National Cannabis Industry Association. Absolutely true. Without that, the biggest companies just buy everyone else out and get even bigger over time. He said, like the top tier 1 MSOs and like how they're set up to do that right now. But he keeps going. It's just so laughable. It's incredibly frustrating. All my fears are being materialized right now. Like, because of your own lack of action, Booker, stop playing victim and do something, you twat. And so just, again, highlighting the walking, talking contradiction that these politicians, become over time. It's laughable, but obviously it sucks because they're the ones in power making decisions that affect our lives. And so we keep chugging along and focusing on the state-led growth story. But thanks, Todd Harrison, for sharing as GOP congressman files cannabis rescheduling bill amid ongoing Biden administration review. And so while this sounds promising, we don't want any rescheduling. I mean, it would possibly be a nice incremental step in the meantime before descheduling in order to get some tax relief, but at the same time, I'd rather just see the plant descheduled. What about you? Let me know in the comments. So interestingly enough, wanted to just share, you can obviously grab the link in the description, but the refiled bill would move cannabis from Schedule 1 to the less restrictive Schedule 3 under federal law. And so still a lot of problems with that, of course, arise. I'm sure problems will arise with a lot of things, but not as many as if you just deschedule, which would effectively make cannabis go from illegal at the federal level to legal at the federal level overnight, which would solve a lot of domestic issues like this, helping expunge and pardon anyone with possession charges that haven't had that yet, while at the same time freeing up resources to go after organized crime groups that cause violence and continue to break the law, while normalizing the legal cannabis industry and highlighting the benefits from states that have reformed their laws and are seeing the benefits already. And so with that, thank you DNBC for sharing this one. Another one out of Marijuana Moment, as Virginia lawmakers in another state this time approved bills on cannabis sales and 280E tax reform. And so we've got 4 states as of now. It seems New York, New Jersey, PA, and Virginia have now Pennsylvania have now provided some 280E relief at the state level, or at least introduced bills that would potentially do that. And so is this a good thing? In the short term, it does sound positive because obviously we'd see MSOs get a lot of profits that they're losing. But Cody has dad jokes, makes a good point down here. While positive for operators currently in the short term, I think it allows the can to be kicked even further at the federal level. And so he does make a good point there. Obviously, we don't necessarily know, but do you think this is a net positive for the industry, or do you think it'll allow them to kick the can? Do let me know in the comments, but the link will be in the description if you wanted to read through. On top of that, though, it is positive that Virginia's finally gotten to launching, or at least writing the legislation and passing it to launch their legal adult use market, as a poll found that Virginia registered voters support allowing recreational cannabis sales 60% to 34%. And so as they decriminalized, I think last year, Virginia, cannabis seems to be normalizing itself already, and people in the state want to see the benefits of adult use launched, especially because it would compete with an organized crime or illegal market that is currently operating if there's no legal market to compete with that. And so, and on that note of Virginia, just wanted to share this from Columbia Care. It's a light news week from the MSOs, but nonetheless now open. Cannabis Hampton. This is our 7th Virginia store, 34th cannabis location, and their 83rd active dispensary in the U.S. And so link will be in the description if you wanted to read a little bit more about Columbia Care's opening there. With that, just carrying on. So thank Joe Reisler for sharing this one. The cannabis industry could add nearly 51,000 jobs in New York State, earning $2.2 billion a year by 2027 if they would open more than 2 damn dispensaries. Very laughable. Obviously, so much potential if we didn't have socialists running the Office of New York Cannabis Management, but nonetheless, hopefully they can course correct and things aren't in too dire of situations. But this story from Buffalo News highlighting what could be if New York were to get their head out of their asses and smarten up and focus on giving equal access to opportunity. And so with that, Todd Harrison shares update out of Minnesota as Minnesota marijuana legalization bill approves in another Senate committee on the path to the floor. So I believe this is the 3rd hurdle out of 12 it has to go through. Our main goals are to legalize, regulate, and expunge, and we're working to ensure this bill does just that. And so good to see progress made out of Minnesota. They've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 more hurdles to go through, but happy to share that nonetheless. So Marijuana Moment, DC mayor signs major medical cannabis expansion bill, eliminating licensing caps and providing tax relief and more. And so it seems like DC, again, as opposed to just removing that rider and launching the legal adult use market, doing everything they can to just make the medical market as accessible to everyone as possible. The mayor of Washington, DC has signed a bill to make fundamental changes to the medical cannabis program in the nation's capital. That will involve eliminating cannabis business licensing caps, so allowing as many businesses as possible, it sounds like, providing tax relief to operators, promising some sort of 280E workaround, further promoting social equity, of course, and creating new regulated business categories such as on-site consumption facilities and cannabis cooking classes. So essentially expanding the industry without removing that rider and launching the official program. But it will also provide a pathway for current gifting operators that sell non-cannabis items in exchange for free cannabis products to enter the licensed market. So it's essentially saying we're going to this is what I'm getting out of it. I could be wrong, but please correct me in the comments. But we're going to make all these illegal sellers that are selling, hey, here's a sweater for $50, and if you buy the sweater, you get, let's say, a quarter of cannabis with it. They're going to just make these like official sellers. That's what I get out of this. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments, but that's what it sounds like. While empowering officials to crack down on those who continue to operate illegally. But what's the difference of those operating illegally versus, you know, this current gifting model where they provide free cannabis as well? I'm not exactly sure. Obviously, there's probably a difference between medical suppliers that can legally sell versus illegal ones selling recreational. I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments, but I just found that very interesting. And so there's more on what DC is planning to do. Of course, you can read through the whole article and grab the link in the description, but interesting to see some progress being made there. That does not just mean DC finally launching their program. And so with this one, Cannabis Biz News highlighting that a poll out of Hawaii, 86% of adult Hawaii residents favor legalizing recreational cannabis. Well, if that was really the case, then why hasn't cannabis been legalized yet in Hawaii? So lawmakers of Hawaii, the people have spoken. It's time to write up some legislation and get that passed. And so with that, Marijuana Moment shares, Rhode Island Supreme Court issues cannabis expungement order under legalization law. And so it seems Rhode Island's top judicial official has released new guidance on expunging cannabis records under a legalization law that was enacted last year. And so good to see, again, small steps from states to help give the lives back to those people who have any sort of possession charge and puts a hinder on, you know, what they can do with their lives. The Superior and District Courts and the Traffic Tribunal will be responsible for identifying eligible cases and processing them to clear the records, which the state previously estimated will impact about 27,000 people in Rhode Island, with only cannabis convictions and thousands more where a cannabis offense is part of their record. And so, from my understanding, convictions for singular cannabis possession offenses would need to be expunged within 3 months of being identified. For more complex cases involving other charges, the deadline for expungement would be July 1st, 2024, which is next year. Crazy to think that we're already in 2023. But at the same time, people may also submit requests for the court to for expedited expungements. And so nonetheless, just providing more opportunity to those in Rhode Island to get their lives back and expunge or pardon any cannabis possession charges that they should not have been arrested for in the first place. And so with that, on to some news out of California. This one comes from Graham Farrar. Now, I don't necessarily understand the implications of this. I'm just sharing the news. So do let me know in the comments if you might have a better understanding of what this will mean. But bombshell news out of CA Cannabis Department, Nicole Elliott, California, this AM asking to turn on the California Cannabis Interstate Commerce Law. As a reminder, 100% of all cannabis legalization progress has been led by the state so far. No reason that interstate commerce will be any different. So this is in response to Natalie Fertig tweeting new this morning on January 30th. The California Cannabis Department is sending a letter to the Attorney General of California, Rob Bonta, requesting a formal opinion on interstate commerce. They argue it would not pose a threat to the state of California. If AG Bonta agrees, California could move to open its borders to weed. And so again, I don't know how this would work at all. This is apparently page 1 and page 8. I'll put all the links in the description from Nats's original tweet. Probably just put Nats's original tweet in the description, so you can go through this thread if you'd like. But yeah, lots, bit more to that. Again, don't necessarily know what it means or how quickly that could happen, but just to highlight how much of a mess the California market is and why it needs some quick fixing. Todd Harrison, thanks for sharing this one. Even Jerry Garcia's Grateful Dead has to leave California, as highlighting their cannabis brand is leaving the mess of the state. Reported by SanFranciscoGate.com, complicated cannabis regulations and high taxes add costs to legal operators, while widespread illegal farms and retailers undercut legitimate companies. And so again, high taxes, bad policy, this is what you get. Sadly, California is the largest cannabis market, or legal cannabis market in the world right now, so we would not like to see this continue. And all we can hope for is that steps are being taken in the long run to hopefully help the legal industry thrive a little bit more than the illegal one. And so with that, MJ Biz Daily sharing new year brings new laws, rules for cannabis businesses nationwide. And so I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but just wanted to share it as it is relevant to the cannabis industry. But about California, some new laws being added in, so you can grab the link in the description if you want to go through the whole thing, or of course you can pause to read. So there's a little bit more down here. Pause to read as well if you're interested in what California is introducing. Oregon, we've got more information on here. Pause to read. And then Utah, pause to read. And Michigan, pause to read. And so other markets to watch if you're interested in some of those developments. And then with that, we've got this one from Biz Journals. So I don't have access behind this paywall, but just highlighting cannabis companies want to use the Super Bowl to grow the industry and their brands. And a fun fact of this year is that the 2023 Super Bowl will mark the second time that the big game is being held in a state where recreational cannabis is legal, as obviously the game last year, 2022, was in Los Angeles. That was the first time where the Super Bowl was held in a state where cannabis was legal. This will be the second time. And so hopefully this will help normalize it a little bit. Maybe we can see a cannabis ad, most likely not. Like last year, they rejected them. But what's a little more hopium after all this time? Am I right? And so with that, on to some studies worth sharing. This one from SSRN, Cannabis Use and COVID-19 Hospitalization Outcomes, a retrospective study. Very interesting findings. All the researchers here listed from this posted on January 28th, 2023. And so, of course, the abstract features a lot more detail, but I'm just going to read the conclusion and invite you to grab the link if you wanted to read through more. Of course, you can pause to read as well, but the conclusion: we found lower mortality rates, lesser need for mechanical ventilation, and reduced hospitalization expenses among cannabis users hospitalized with COVID-19. What? That is wild. Further research is required to determine whether cannabinoid is a candidate for the treatment and prevention of COVID-19. And we saw stories like this in 2020, 2021 almost. Obviously, they didn't get pushed out into the mainstream, but clearly these findings speak for themselves and are noteworthy of more potential research, and obviously more arguments why we ought to deschedule sooner than later, but I found that very interesting. And then we got another one from Leafly. I think I did feature this article in my last week's video, but just wanted to share it nonetheless. Weed is not a gateway drug, new study finds. And so, again, more data to highlight what we already know, but, hopefully at some point the politicians will eventually have to listen, or at least acknowledge the new data that highlights a lot of what they said and a lot of fears that they spread in the past do not hold any weight. And so, of course, you can pause more to read, or you can grab the link in the description below. And so, last one, edge of your seat, Germany's timetable for cannabis legalization. And so, we do have an update, which I'm happy to share as of January 30th. Over the weekend, a potentially significant report surfaced regarding cannabis legalization in Germany. So, since that time, Lauterbach has lobbied the European Union for its permission to proceed with formally introducing the plan for consideration by German lawmakers. According to the report, the link will be here, probably in German, but I'll put it in the description anyways. Lauterbach is certain that the European Union will grant its approval and that the formal introduction of the legalization measure will occur in the first quarter of this year. Minister Lauterbach added, according to the report, that he has no reason to doubt the schedule. So that's very promising to hear that. And then on top, given that the better part of January 2023 is already in the history books, that means if the Minister Lauterbach scheduled indeed approved, or that means that if Minister Lauterbach's schedule indeed proves to be accurate, then Germany's lawmakers could be considering a national adult use legalization measure by the end of March. And we're February 1st, so that could be less than 2 months. And so there we have it, the most recent update out of Germany. Obviously, more in this article if you wanted to pause to read what will be legalized in Germany and some of the details. Full article will be in the description, but just wanted to relay that happy. We're looking out for the end of March to see something introduced in Germany. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it, subscribe below, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.